of Ukraine, and I invite here Maksym Nefiodov, Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine, and Kachka, Head of the Ukraine Reforms Communication Taskforce. Hello, colleagues. Our traditional briefing of constructive news about what's happening, about the key. We talked yesterday that the Parliament is rather active in their work, and in fact, every week we see some positive changes. And yesterday there was a voting for the draft law 27A that changes quite a lot in state procurement and public procurement, and of course the civil society pays a lot of attention to it, about how the money is being spent, and I'm very glad that Deputy Minister of Economic Development Maksym Nefiodov has agreed to tell us in detail about what this law means, about the changes to the current legislation, and I think that the explanation of forthcoming changes is very important. And as I understand, yesterday there was a certain development about the use of electronic systems in state procurement. So, thank you very much. I remind you once more, maybe not everyone knows this, about the plan of the reform of public procurement after sad events that happened to 1551 draft law that did not find support in the Parliament. We broke the reform in legislative sense into two parts: the improvement of the legislation on public procurement that there is now, and a separate draft law on electronic procurement. Why we did this? Because of course it's difficult to understand when everything is mixed up and thrown into one pile, both for public and for lawyers. And secondly, the changes, then we are already ready to amend the current legislation, but we do want to wait until two pilot projects are completed within the ProZorro system to adopt a law on electronic procurement. The first pilot project started last year, and it's about procurement to the tune less than 100,000 hryvnia. These procurements are not regulated by the current law. Any state customer can do this as they please. So we suggested that those who are ready to experiment, that they join the new system of electronic procurement, ProZorro. More than 2,000 tenders have already happened in the system, and more than 100 of them are already closed, and the contracts will be signed eventually. Last week we have crossed a psychological barrier of 100 new tenders a day. All the ministries are joined to the system, both huge customers like Energoatom, National Bank of Ukraine, ports, and very small organizations as well, like some vocational schools or outpatient clinics. This provides us a rather interesting feedback from both huge companies and who want the process of procurement to be incessant, and they want the system to be comfortable, to the small tender committees where they can't even very well use a computer, and where they have their own problems, like for instance they do not whether to press OK or cancel. And the second project is happening within the framework of over-threshold procurement for the Ministry of Defense, which was allowed by the cabinet of ministers to buy military equipment and food in electronic format. And yesterday, the Minister of Defense have published their official order, resolution, which regulates how the electronic procurement should happen. This again will provide us with a rather interesting feedback, and you all understand that the new system to be used by tens of thousands of companies is impossible to build without any mistakes, and so we think that the stage of the pilot project will continue until September. There will be criticism, and in September we will be already some use from all this, and I'm sure that everyone in this room have their own idea about how this should be done. And about statistics, we will have the idea how the sellers react to this and how the tender committees use this. And now, about what has already happened. Yesterday in the first reading, the draft law 2087A was supported, endorsed. It's about the reform of the current legislation, its improvement, patching the holes, and so on. 2087 concerns four major directions. First, anti-corruption. Several very important amendments that are adjusted and agreed with a lot of anti-corruption organizations like Amnesty, Transparency International, and the rehabilitation package of reforms, and representatives of MPs, and so on. They include the checking of the information on the end beneficiary. This is another tool to find plots on the market. Also the publication of making public the documents about prices. At the moment, there's a rather banal instrument that when they choose a winner, but no one knows why this winner was selected. We do not know. Maybe their offers were so attractive that the tender commission was able to arrive at a conclusion, but still there is a lot of question marks. We insist that all the lots should be public, and the regulator and other participants in the competition should be able to check it. And there's a important thing to publish the protocols of the assessment. At the moment, we publish only a generalized assessment of the tender decision. For instance, we have a case when there was no consensus where 9 members voted in favor and 1 voted against, and then there was an inspection and they tried to take an explanation from these people, and 10 out of 10 members said that they were those who voted against. And of course it is everyone's right to not to agree, and these decisions should be public. Another important thing that we have to provide for is the inability to block the trade. You know, the cases when purchases of medicines and all the other things are blocked by bad intentioned participants, and we are doing a lot in order to make this process more forecastable. We do set the limits when the complaints should be launched. we also table a norm that one and the same point cannot be appealed against twice. For instance, if you have claims against the package of tendering documents, you have to complain against it once. You cannot first complain against sentence one and then, for instance, go for the second sentence. We also quite a lot of time all the changes should be aimed at some people want to invent as much punishment for the participants in the contents as possible. We think that this is an important but insufficient element, because if these tenders are not comfortable for we will have 2 or 3 suppliers who do take part in the contest, but all the rest say, we don't want to deal with you with all your bans, and we don't want to even explain that the higher competition is, then the lower the price is, and the lesser number of participants is, then the probability of a plot is higher. So for us, the most important change that we suggest is self-declaration. At the moment, every participant has to collect the entire package of documents and submit them together with their bid. We now make an amendments whereby every participant just declares that they correspond to all the requirements, and they submit the documents only when they are selected as winners. This lessens the burden on tendering committees, as they do not have to analyze the entire amount of all the statistical data. This is tens of thousands of pages, files this thick and this high.
And at this stage, you have to check it whether this company is registered, whether there is a piece of some certificate from the tax office. We believe that's a monkey work, and you need to check it. Check the company which won the tender. If they fail to provide such certificates in a few days, then they are disqualified, and the next participant is considered to be the one that won. Also, the state treasury is also inspecting and checking. We want to introduce some transparent rules of games, and also we delegate some of the powers to the Ministry of Economic Development, and we also cancel such thing as the function of monitoring of public procurements. I would like to explain why we are doing that. First of all, the society demands to conduct the regulation and to reduce the number of people in the state apparatus, but that is impossible without reducing the functions. If we do the same that we are doing with 3 times or 5 times less people, it will be impossible. But what is the regulation? The regulation leads to increasing number of functions. Every civil servant is interested in having more functions, more resources, more subordinates, more salary, and so on and so forth. And that is why this is one of the steps towards the real cancelling of the functioning, which is not useful for us. Also, I would like to explain what is monitoring in practice. We need to check procurements. The Ministry of Economy is the regulator of that process, and We have to inspect everyone, to punish everyone if we find mistakes, but in reality more than half of all people in the Department of Procurement are busy with this very important function. That is what takes most of the time. With that, all these people are checking less than 1% of tenders taking place in the country. The result of their work is quite doubtful. I believe you all have understanding and you will agree to me that we have more problems with the tenders than the problems of 1/10 of all these tenders. In practice, the MP writes that there is a certain problem with a certain tender. We see that everything, it looks well, not very well. We procure baby's food and the cost is like the food at an expensive restaurant. What are the powers of the Ministry of Economy? And that inspection takes place post factum. Everything happened, the money is spent. Then post factum we demand the document. They cannot give it to us. There are cases when they do not give us the documents. Then we request to give us these documents. We go to the court and so on and so forth. But in practice, if they don't give it these documents to us, there's no punishment for that. Or we go to the court. Then we also are inspecting and checking all these procurements only formally. It's not like we procure the baby food at the price of caviar, but we look at whether the tender documents were compiled correctly, were all these 1,000 certificates received from the company. Yes, we received them, and then we found out that the cheapest proposal was at the price of the caviar. There's no violation, or even if we find a violation, we believe there was a violation, our powers to address this situation are minimum. We can send the request to law enforcement bodies and or submission to law enforcement bodies, but I don't have any information about any successful example when someone would really follow up on the result of our inspection. And we believe that this functionality in Ukrainian reality is an extra one, and it also has very serious corruption risks, because many times we saw what was happening in 2012, 2013, 2014, and these inspections, these audits are using by tender committees as indulgence. They invite the inspection to receive the positive result. We want to make it impossible. What do we replace this monitoring with? We replace it with the computer. We replace it with the system of business intelligence. That is the system which provides real-time access to the information on public procurements. This module is in beta interface. We saw that at several conferences. The representatives of anti-corruption organizations saw that. We are purchasing servers and will present it to the public. Anyone would be able to get the information about the tenders which take place in electronic platforms in real-time mode before the agreement is signed. Anyone would be able to monitor 100% tenders, not all of them, not 10%. There will be no technical possibility not to provide the information, and it's not just some persons in the Ministry of Economy who will be able to do this monitoring, but anyone would be able to do that. The journalists, the representatives of anti-corruption NGOs, politicians, competitors, those who know about the problems at the tender better. They can explain why the price was increase. This is the company that is not known in the market, and so on. ClickView company, which is the leader in business intelligence, American company, they gave us 300 licenses for public use forever. They presented them. We really appreciate that because the commercial price of these licenses are hundreds $1,000. So anyone now will be able to see the graphs, any structure or anything. And in the result, based on this system, we will organize real monitoring. The real monitoring should be like that. If we have an average price of the procurement of the gasoline by the authority for a certain period of time, if someone starts purchasing it at a price which is 10 times higher than the average price, then the system would automatically put an alert. We don't need the participation of a person. We don't need MP to send some submission. There might be some explanation. Maybe that's some extra procurement in the ATO zone, or maybe that's super unique gasoline for airplanes. But with the probability of 99%, something is wrong there, and this they will come not. It will not be just the Ministry of Economy that will come with inspection, but this will be the law enforcement bodies that will come with inspection. And two more things about our draft. May I add, we need to speak a little bit Estonian way. The main logic is that our public procurements are perceived more like just splitting the profit. And because of that, we'll lose the interest to public procurements from business. On the other hand, public procurements have always been a classical instrument of stimulating economy. It's like a tattoo that many economists have. The public procurement is the factor that stimulates the economy. And what Maksym is talking about is directed towards us getting business interested in participating in tenders. We reduce corruption on the one hand, and on the other hand, we are trying to popularize public procurements as the source of income for business, which is quite honest, transparent, and does not lead to long persecutions. And also the effect of sabotage. For this idea to really be accepted, well, we need to understand the simpler is the idea, the easier it is to use it. People are afraid usually to participate in tender committee because tomorrow, for example, the Ministry of Economy will come with some complaints, and again, the participants of the public procurements will be made responsible. It's not just to simplify things inside the state, but to make public procurements attractive for business. So I will be finishing two more groups of changes. First is we increase threshold for public procurement in accordance with inflation. Even now, there are several draft laws in the parliament from MPs with the same objective, because the threshold of 100,000 hryvnias that I mentioned, sometimes it is more expensive to organize tender than the cost of what is being purchased. So we increase it to 200,000 hryvnias. That's quite technical change. And one more thing. Our legislation from the point of view of the time frame of procurement will be adapted to the government procurement agreement standard, which is the global standard in the sphere of public procurements, that Ukraine is planning to join it by the end of this year. This will be like a sign of quality We will also get an access to the markets of public procurements of 42 countries members of the agreement. And these are the markets in the amount of $1.7 trillion. The United States, Japan, all EU countries. That is very real way to support Ukrainian business and Ukrainian export, because it opens up the markets which were closed for them before. Because of devaluation, many Ukrainian producers, even those who have never thought about export, they become competitive in Europe and globally. One of the easiest ways for them to export their products is what Taras mentioned, this participation in public procurements in Ukraine and in other countries. Because in order to sell their product to commercial sector, you need to have some network of distributors, some contracts, and so on and so forth. That's not easy to do, but at the same time, if you want to participate in the tender to supply toilet paper in Poland or some food products in Germany, this is much easier from the point of view of regulations, because public procurement is a standard regulated process in any country. You can just submit the standard application, it will be considered and you will get an answer in the standard time frame. This is what we can do to support Ukrainian export. We don't have money to support, but we need to create something interesting. So joining this agreement is this interesting way. Even if Ukrainian companies in a few years will be able to take 0.5% or 0.3% of the market, it's still about 100 millions or billions of dollars of additional export, which was not accessible for Ukrainian companies before. Ukraine has submitted its final proposal, its final application to join this agreement, and we believe that it will be positively perceived by all members of the organization, will be considered, and in December we will join this agreement, and we are making some technical amendments, like the time frame for procurement. We are changing some technical things, but these are very important things, because that's a real help for Ukrainian export. It's much more real than some theoretical structures which will not start operating in a few months, and this can start operating in a few months, and the market will be open. The 4 groups of changes which are in the draft law 2287, we are happy that this draft was supported in the first reading. We are happy that the majority of factions were voting for that.
And it didn't meet any essential resistance. It collected 270 votes in favor of it, and we are now expecting a fruitful cooperation with MPs while it is being prepared for the second reading, and we do hope that it will be adopted on the 14th or 16th of July, before this session of the Parliament ends. No questions, so we are expecting same success stories with other draft